basically goes to charity. What that did for us was actually incredible, because we then, our constraint after that point of time was to find good causes that could really be scaled up. And that's where I think the Give India team really has come in extremely handy, because we've set a budget every year for ourselves which is higher than the previous year, with the objective really being to effectively give away all our income every year. And so far there have been incredible projects that we have come about. We still, it's only this year's for the first year that we've actually found more interesting projects than what we are able to give, and we feel good about that. But I think once that capital was available, then it really went through a very organized process of thinking about the objectives we wanted to achieve, where do you get the best bang for the buck, and allocated it out to a bunch of NGOs. We focus a lot on sustainability, especially outside core education. Core education, unfortunately, still is, like Mr. Mittal pointed out, you have to write the checks. People don't expect to give you money for it, neither does the government nor do families. But everywhere else, we're focusing on seeding sustainable models. So, for example, building vocational centers where after the capex is done, the opex is completely funded by people who will, hire the students who are graduating from it. We have funded some centers in Bihar with the organization called People Free that Give India introduced us to. We're building now a hospital that 11 families in Bombay have got together to build, in partnership with Mr. Ramadurai and Devi Shetty, where again it's built on a sustainability model where paying patients get state-of-the-art care and subsidize patients who can't pay. So we keep looking for opportunities like this, which essentially are sustainable, where you really have to seed the initial capital, the capex, and I think we've been able to find interesting opportunities every year.
Our way of giving is not as logical as Amit's, especially mine is more intuitive. And I have gone wrong, as I said, but luckily I have a daughter who does the due diligence for me. But I go by my gut feeling, and I want to do something that I feel like.
Okay, final question. In many ways, giving it's a little bit like investing, right? So how aggressively do you manage your portfolios? Do you look at that? Do you it seems to me like a very, very aggressive management.
Very aggressively. I think we have different tiers of causes that we support. If something's in tier 1, it's reviewed almost on a monthly basis, and that's often a proper review. So the school that Anu and I are helping build in Bihar for the Musahar kids, we expect a monthly report from them talking about the progress. We back that up then with a site visit at least a couple of times a year, detailed review sessions with them. But there's an 80-20 to it. There are other causes where you can't do that, but we at least have a portfolio review every meeting, every quarter. Sorry, it sounds very private equity-like, but that's what the team does for us, it's a key part of our process to make sure what Anu has a daughter do. We have the Give India team do for us.
As I said, most of our funds go to Teach for India in Akanksha, where we are on the board, and there is good monitoring happening. But one of like Bihar or Parivar, no, I don't monitor so much. Before someone from our company or from someone who we know will go, or we rely on Give India to tell us, and then we trust them.
Okay. Final question. This is to Amit because he's from the private equity business. When you look at venture capital, private equity investments in companies, typically what we've seen happening after the initial phase is that one venture capitalist finds a good company to invest in, and there's a group of guys who go and invest. Do you see the same thing happening in philanthropy?
Yes, actually, and I think it's very valuable. that's how ecosystems get created, and some of the best things that we have found have been because of the network effect. So, we got associated with Akanksha, both Anu and I, because we got to know people who, are either the founder or, in my case, actually my wife worked full-time at Akanksha, and that's how I got to know Akanksha better. The school we are building in Bihar, it was actually discovered by one of India's most prominent private equity investors, who's an unnamed philanthropist, and prefers to remain so. But he introduced us to it as a great cause. He and I went with Deepa to Bihar and spent a few days touring NGOs. And so often the causes, are discovered because somebody knows someone, and the credibility gets established initially because of that. So I think that, and that's exactly what the design, I think, of the First Givers Club is meant to be. It's not just meant to be to, inspire each other to figure out what more you can do, but really utilize each other's network, just the way, someone asked Mr. Mittal questions about the Bharti Foundation, and will probably land up following up with a visit to it. I think that's exactly the kind of, affiliations that these kind of networks create, which ultimately lead to good causes scaling up, just the way good companies will scale up. So I think that's actually a very valuable part of philanthropy.
Okay, we're going to throw it open for questions. There's a lady there who got her hand up first. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yes, we can.
I'm Ravika Shrikant. I'm on the board of SOS. And just to set it in context, I'm a forensic investigator from profession, so been 20 years in private sector, and right now engaged with the Government of India. And a couple of engagements I've been with Ernst & Young leading the forensic practice, and with the World Bank. One of the dilemma which I dealt personally, and I've lived through that event, is this was back in 2010 during my World Bank days, Pakistan floods. And one of the questions which was asked in the bank, when it's such a failed governance, would you go ahead with the aid or not? Or would you deny it? And I was part of the team which developed a policy that you cannot call off aid, but what are those significant, what are those key checkpoints you're going to build in? So I think that's a question which left me quite disturbed. And I just was, though I was head of forensic accounting for the World Bank globally, but I couldn't put, that if these parameters are not met and they hit red button, you pull out the plug on Pakistan. I mean, you have no idea what will happen there then. And the good part, the bank went ahead with the loan, but we were significantly involved in the cash transfer scheme, and the checks were there. So I think that's a conscious question we need to ask ourselves. That I was listening to Mr. Mittal and everyone. I mean, I like Amit especially because I can resonate, because I'm coming from the due diligence forensic background. That you've got to take a call, but how important is sustainability, capacity building? That if I want to pull the plug, is the NGO or can the development program, can they run by themselves? Are we actually creating a capacity, or are we just giving aid that okay, school got created, wall got created? So that's something that I think I would encourage. And second thing, last year finally I decided to give up private sector, so I'm in public service. That was a very conscious call. And one of the projects I started working, I couldn't take it forward with 3 other people, is what I felt this country is lacking, what you were talking about, the scientific selection method, that if I were to map all the MDBs to the districts, to the NGO requirements, there is no visibility. So if anyone wants to take this initiative forward, I've got a complete mapping of all the 4,500 plus districts. I've called the NGO registry. But it's just that because the Government of India called me, I couldn't contribute. But anyone who wants to take this initiative, this would be the scientific method that we can identify which MDBs are not being addressed in the country and which geographies are not being attended to. So, and third question to Amit actually. You talked about affiliations, and definitely collaborations are happening. I've seen myself Oxfam collaborations happening with many other Swiss NGOs. I used to work in Switzerland for a long time. What are your thoughts? That won't the aid be more effective and impactful that if we can see more collaborations the way we see it in corporate sector?
Okay, thank you. Last one.
So I think the third question, undoubtedly, things would be, you'll see a completely different level of impact if there was much more greater collaboration. Because I think, first of all, what collaboration really does is it eliminates that fear that, you know, we've heard even Mr. Mittal talk about and Anu referred to, that will your money be used, you know, properly. I think, you know, if you have people who are working with the NGO, rating them, looking at level of transparency, if there is a personal connect that someone has had with that NGO for a long period of time, it lowers that, you know, bar enormously and lets you make the first step. So I think definitely very important. The second thing is, I think historically people have just expected philanthropy to be rich families, you know, old wealth, as Sukumar put it, you know, building institutions. But I think the power of this country going forward actually lies in its, you know, people more broadly, whether it's the new professional class or it is actually even folks who are just graduating out of schools and going into their first jobs in BPOs. And if you really think of it, I mean, for example, when the Give India video was going on, you know, they talked about there are more than 30,000 donors now who are payroll donors. These are effectively people who are working in BPOs and writing about 200 rupees a month to a cause of their choice. But when it becomes, you know, 30,000 of them and that number is growing at a rapid pace, that's the power of collaboration, right? Then you suddenly see the numbers bubble up to 30 crores a year of giving that Give India channels. So I think similarly, I talked about professional collaboration. I think there's a big opportunity for professionals in this country to get together and replicate things which families historically did. You know, Sanjeev sitting at the back is a part of a group that has created something called Young India Fellowship in Delhi and is now building the Ashoka University. It's an incredible example of how professionals can get together and build, I mean, it's a 125 crore project, you know, and build those kind of institutions in a short period of time. I talked about the example of, you know, we are building this most state-of-the-art pediatric hospital, charitable hospital in Bombay. That's basically, again, a bunch of families getting together. So I think collaborations have huge value and we should not underestimate them.
Okay, we want to take one more question. I'm not looking that side at all. Just one quick question.
Do I need a mic? I don't know.
The people at the back might be.
I have one or two small comments plus a small query too. When you visit an NGO or an institution, you see what they want to show you. That's true. Then I also recall the old Mr. Jugal build-up. Somebody commented that 90% of the charity, 50% of the charity that you give, that 50% of the charity that you give goes waste. What was his response? Do you know? I thought only 10% is utilized. That is good enough for me. If you say 50% is utilized, I am very happy. The third is, sir, I don't know whether one can get into an audit of kind of NGO and all that. That's a very complicated and sometimes demeaning to the NGO. For example, why theoretically there cannot be a vested interest in Give India itself? So these kinds of questions are very delicate. So you have to do something which comes from your heart, swanta sukha. That is my view.
That was what Anu also said.
Closer to what...
No, having said that, no. While giving, the first giving comes from intuition. I do want to know that it's a credible NGO, their accounts are transparent. Definitely.
That is true.
But when I initially want to give, I don't go through all that first. Okay. I don't think a credible NGO will only spend 50%. I'm positive it will spend 100%. And please look for NGOs who will spend 100% of what you give in the right way. And make a visit without announcing. Then how can they put on a facade? Don't announce.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Aga, Mr. Chandra, and Mrs. Sukumar for sharing your thoughts. And may I request you to please take your seats on the table. Our final session in the summit is Partnerships for Change, presenting 3 NGO leaders and their key donors. These donors have provided financial aid and have also helped the NGOs with their networks and skills. I'd like to welcome and invite on stage our next panel, Mrs. Nirmala Tandon, Mr. Ajay Relan, Mr. S. Sandilya, Mr. Deepak Sriram, Mrs. Kiran Modi, and Mr. Amit Agarwal. May I request you all to come up on stage and take your seats. At this juncture, I want to also just mention that there's a self-assessment questionnaire in the kit which we request you to carry back and fill it up later. I'll briefly introduce our panel. Nirmala Tandon had a highly successful teaching career of 17 years at Delhi Public School, which she gave up to join impact in February 2005. At the school, in addition to her teaching, her responsibilities included conducting workshops and teacher training for newly opened DPS schools. She is the driving force behind iPact's day-to-day activities. Ajay Relan is the founder and managing partner at CX Partners. He also serves as managing director of Sharada Motor Industries Limited. No? He served as the head of private equity venture in India at Citibank since 1995. Mr. Relan completed his President Management Program from Harvard Business School. He holds an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and graduated from St. Stephen's College. Mr. Sandilya is a commerce graduate from Chennai University and an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad in 1969. He's a president of SOS Children's Villages, India. Mr. Sandilya had served as the group chairman and chief executive officer of iSure Limited. Deepak Sriram served as senior vice chairman and managing director of Sriram Pistons and Rings Limited. Mr. Sriram served as manager of DCM Limited. Mr. Sriram currently is the chairperson at Sriram Automotive Products Limited. And he has served on the board of SOS Children's Villages India for 6 years and continues to be closely associated with the organization. After teaching English to undergraduate students at Delhi University, Kiran Modi decided to work in community services and she founded Udayan Care India. Udayan is a Sanskrit word signifying eternal sunrise. Her aim is to bring sunshine into the lives of the disadvantaged. Udayan Care provides quality care to the disadvantaged children and women, expanding its horizons to reach out to the undeserved sections of society that need interventions. Amit Agarwal is a senior vice president and global leader training and development at Genpact. Amit has contributed to various business functions at Genpact as a recruitment leader, quality leader, and global SEP leader, responsible for leading the conceptualization, creation, prototyping, and piloting of Genpact's smart enterprise process methodology. He also oversees CSR and diversity for the company. I'd like to ask Cordelia Jenkins to moderate this session now.
Thank you very much. So we've heard a lot about the reasons and the strategies that quite established givers have been employing as they've been deciding how to parcel out their wealth. But I think that one of the things that is difficult for first-time givers, well, there are 2 real problems. The first is, you've decided to give, and yet the whole world is at your feet, and so which sector do you give to, and how do you decide which cause is right for you? And the second is, how do you know who to trust? And I think that's something that Give India is particularly useful for. And so for this session, we're going to be talking to partnerships of donors and NGOs about their relationship with each other and how that has worked to the advantage of both. So 2 by 2, we're going to do 5 minutes from each donor on their reasons for giving. Perhaps if you could tell us a little bit about what attracted you to the cause in the first place, how you became involved, and your experiences so far. And then we'll speak to the NGOs about what the impact's been on them and what they think they can do in the future to sort of expand on what's happened. So if we can start, I think, with Mr. Ajay Relan. Will you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with impact?
Well, I think, first of all, the question that you asked, why education? I think I probably can talk from personal experience about the transformative power of education. So I grew up in a place in Delhi called Motia Khan, which today probably that particular neighborhood has been razed to the ground because it was unfit for human living anymore. It's in Paharganj, and this was soon after the partition in 1953, when I was born in that neighborhood, and we had rows of 3 quarters, 17 quarters each row, and between these rows we had open drains, and I remember sleeping out in the streets between these rows of quarters, and in the morning I would have pigs, which would roam the streets to scavenge for food, and sometimes their snouts would come and touch our feet as we, so that's the kind of neighborhood there was. And in that neighborhood, I still remember I was about 9 or 10 years old when they would truly celebrate somebody who would get a first division. Somebody got a first division, and it was as if that neighborhood had won an Olympic medal, because 50% of the students would fail. And if somebody passed, I remember there were sweets that were distributed. So my father, at the time, had the foresight to send me to St. Xavier's, which had just opened in 1960. Most people went to municipal schools. And I met a friend of mine after 45 years, and we were the best of friends when we were 10. And we studied together, and he went to a municipal school. And I met him after 45 years. And as we talked about, the friends we had at the time, the guys who didn't go to school joined gangs, and some of them were dead, as a consequence of the lives they chose to lead. And it was not really their fault. It was the fault of the poverty and the fact that they did not have opportunity. This friend of mine who went to a municipal school is a manager of a very small branch of a bank in Delhi, in fact a defense colony, so we are really neighbors because that's where our office is. And the only difference between him and I was that my father had the foresight to send me to school, which is a public school versus a municipal school. So I think that's the transformative power of education. So when we set up CX Partners, all of us decided that we will contribute 2% of our total revenues towards education, one. And secondly, I think all research has shown that unless a society has women who are emancipated, educated, and empowered, they probably form the bulwark of a progressive and prosperous society. So to our mind, it was clear that education is going to be a cause, and girl education specifically is going to be the cause that we are going to support. And then, I think, unlike most of you, or like Amit, who looks at it probably from a private equity standpoint, and although I am also a private equity individual, but I think, I'm much more like, Mrs. Anuaga out there. I believe that you have to trust people who are credible. And I have a very good friend from IIM Ahmedabad called Karthi Namgar, who called me one day and said, you must meet, Urvashi Nair. I think she's here somewhere. Yeah, there she is. And she came and made a presentation about this particular organization that they run. And we were just mesmerized and very impressed by what they were doing. And subsequently, our interaction, I must admit, is minimal. And we get regular reports from them. But they do such a wonderful job because it's run by a very credible group of people. I know Rishi's family, her husband's, sister, Meena Nair. I can't see her doing something which is fraudulent or probably even taking a penny away of her money which is not spent, judiciously and towards the right cause. So in that sense, I think, our giving is very much dependent on who the people behind the organizations are. And if you can trust them and they are really credible, then we are done. They do send us reports and we look at them And I think for us, interacting with the children and going out there is much more from the standpoint of understanding. Because, you know, even sitting here, we're sitting at the Oberoi, right? And we work out of offices which are relatively plush compared to the environments that we see when we visit these schools. I think it just connects us to the reality of India and how much that needs to be done. And I think, as somebody said, it's never enough. So I guess our approach is, and that's how we started. We started with a personal contribution when Rishi approached us in 2010, and then we broadened that, and then we hope that we can, you know, extend that even further.
And at what point do you then decide, and you found the person that you believe in, and you trust them, and you've established a relationship with one particular organisation? At what point do you decide then that you might want to sort of increase the level of engagement that you have by perhaps becoming more involved in sort of the running of it, or in terms of including other people?
Becoming more involved is, I have a very different view on that score. I don't know anything at all about being able to teach and how to run and administer programs that they do, because they do them in collaboration with the village authorities, with NGOs that are already operating there. I have no clue. All I know is that you can't do enough. So for us, it's simply about saying that if we have another fund, where aside of our revenues increase, we will probably try and see whether we can extend that 2% to hopefully 3 or 4. But in this country, I think it's not about what's the level of engagement. I think the level of engagement can be infinite, you know, from our standpoint. I think that's the enormity of the task, which I'm sure, you know, they are they are encountering.
And Nirmala, if you were going to talk to someone who was approaching you for the first time, people have a lot of choices, even when they're looking at education, especially when they're looking at education. Why should a donor look to impact rather than someone else? What is it about your organisation that makes you think worthy of investing in?
Impact is different from many organizations. Now, just in brief, I will tell you how. See, we, of course, to begin with, let me tell you, in very short, that we educate girl children in the rural areas, really, really remote rural areas, where there are no schools. Now, these are the areas which could be in the jungles, they could be in the Maoist-infested areas, they could be in the Naxalite-infested areas, and they could be in the Chambal Valley areas. These are the areas that we are in. What we do is that we conduct a survey, we see the area, we see the geography, where the need is the maximum and where there are no schools. This is where impact steps in. Very often, donors and our supporters tell us that, why don't you start here? This is my hometown. Some say, oh, why don't you start here? This is my factory, within the factory premises nearby. But we try to counsel them and we tell them that here there are schools, here there are other people who are working in that area, but we are in areas where there are people, I think, who only God knows them. I don't think these are the areas where we see a lot of organizations or we see other people who are working in. It is very, very touching. Like, for example, this gentleman sitting over here had put a question to Mr. Mittal saying that no organization works in Orissa that way. Let me tell you, we work in Orissa. We work in areas which are declared as backward states of India. And we park the car, we walk for 2 hours, and then we reach that area, and you know what we see? I mean, it will bring tears to my eyes, but sorry. You know what? The people, very many people, are still plucking, breaking, roasting, and eating. This is the area area that we are working in the Gajapati block of Orissa. Now this is the area which needs maximum support, and when I go to my donors, I request them and I do get support. Here I would reiterate that Thakurkunda block of Orissa, which is declared as the most backward state by the government of India, we are there. We are in the jungles. And when I went there personally for the first time with the officials of the Dorabji Tata Trust who help us in a very big way in that area, you know what the villagers told me? The villagers told me, ma'am, thoda aur ruk jaiye, abhi heart lagega. Why don't you see the heart and go? And you know what their heart was? Their heart was, sacks as big as these, which I think they didn't even have a kilo of rice or dal, over there, and that was the heart. And then when I started talking to them, they said that, when the family members go to work and they have to cross the jungle area, then the main road, and then go further beyond, very many times it happens that they don't come back home because there are no lights. And when they are coming back, sometimes they are trampled by elephants or trucks, etc., etc. So these are the difficult terrains that we are in. Very often when I travel, in the Pakur block of Jharkhand, people say, oh, this is a Naxalite infested area, you should never work in that area. But we are. Why not? We are there to support the people. And we are also now in the Chambal area, where people say they are dacoits. If no one is there to help them, someone has to go there. Someone has to reach out to the people to support these girls, in the area. Otherwise, who is going to support them? They will remain the same like they are. And unfortunately, the mothers now, they also don't go to work because how will these girls be left alone at home? So we are an organization which is reaching out to areas where the need is the maximum. Now, I'll tell you a little more how we are different. We are different because we request our donors to support a learning center. We put a board outside a learning center saying sponsored by, for example, CX Partners. Mr. Raylan can go and visit the center whenever he wants to, with us or without us. And, there are 30 to 35 girls in a learning center. Another very important thing, that this particular area or the learning center is given to us by the villagers. Impact has no money in terms of, we have no corpus, we have no building, we have no extra funds. Every penny that we receive goes to our girls in the villages. Now I'll tell you how. Mr. Jhunjhunwala's photograph is here. Mr. Jhunjhunwala is bearing our entire admin cost. I am honorary, my colleague is honorary, but he is bearing our entire admin cost. But now that we are in 9 states of India, and I definitely want to be in Chhattisgarh also. I want to be in the area, I want to be with the girls where there are no schools, and people say, oh, these are Mao-infested areas. You didn't hear what happened recently. But we have to be there. Someone has to be for them in that area. And when we expanded, then our first donor, Sarla Education Trust, said, no, we will help you, we will support you for training. So therefore, we've now got funds for the resource center, and which is, that fund is being used for training the teachers. We train the teachers 4 times a year. We do not get teachers who are BA, BEd, or senior teachers in the areas that we work in. We take in girls who are 10th pass or 12th pass, because that is what we get in the remote areas, and we train them 4 times a year, 5 times a year, and that is how these girls become the friends of our girls, Sehbaginis, and our program continues to be in this stage. So this is how we are a lot different from the others.
And therefore, the emotional connection between an NGO like yours and between a donor is quite tough. But I want to ask Deepak, you also have had a long association with the NGO which you've chosen to support. Right.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about how you first came across it, and what was it about that particular NGO which made you think this is what I want to give to?
I came on the board in 2000. As indeed I began to believe in charity firstly, and I came on the board in 2000. I've been there for about 7 years. I was a member of the board for 7 years. Then I became the chairman of the Resource Program Committee, RM Committee for raising funds. I was personally involved in raising funds through many of our group companies and through many other corporate donors and first general donors. This has been a very rich experience for me. I have personally visited a number of villages. It's clear and you see how the children are part of the movement. It's very sad, but such is India's movement, but it's coming up very, very fast. I went to see a village in Bhavana about 5 years ago. I come to go to see villages once in a while. And I find that the mother concept, the brother sister concept, the house concept, the village concept is a very, very big concept. We have about 38 villages all over India, and I believe we are one of the largest in the world.
In a single country, yes, but
Single
world by
largest
world
country.
country. Yeah.
And firstly, it is very emotional to me. I have 5 children of my own, but I have about 20 or 30 children to support. Apart from me, personally, and also separately.
And therefore your engagement manages to sort of increase over the years, as it were,
Yes,
and to sort of
right,
broaden.
right.
And what difference does it make, do you think, from the perspective of somebody who runs an organisation like this, to have had a longer association with givers? Do you find that there's a different way in which they give? Or do you think that in the first 3 years, 1 to 3 years, someone can really make a